You talked about the King holiday in Greenville. Ultimately, it was not the protest, but the strategy that won the day. You want to talk about it?
Well, I always want to talk about it. My husband Thaddeus always says, David, if you don't talk about it, people will think they just voluntarily gave y'all the King holiday. Well, no, it wasn't voluntary. It started when Daddy died, and Reverend Jackson came to Greenville to deliver his eulogy. And he asked Miss Lotta Gibson, Lotta, what's going on in Greenville? And she said, we're still trying to get that holiday. And Reverend was shocked. He said, well, we need to work on that. I'll help you. I'll come to Greenville. And we protested. We went to county council every 2 weeks. Reverend came for several sessions of county council, asking to be heard. They wouldn't let us speak. And we spent the night at county council. We delivered a petition with 12,000 signatures on it. They still wouldn't budge. There were councilmen that told me to my face, the people in Greenville don't want this. It's just outsiders. And I said, well, I was born and raised in Greenville and I want it. So show me the outsiders. But, that was the attitude. And we even had African-Americans to tell us, oh, you'll never get the holiday. So decide on something else that you want. But we coalesced, and you know that's true. We coalesced and had, I wish we had a way of counting the people who were at the march, but people came from all over Greenville and some from Spartanburg and Lawrence and a couple other places for the march. And the march was wonderful, but just like you said, the march didn't give us the holiday. The march didn't help to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act. It was the coming together of the people, the coalescing on one idea, deciding that this is what we want and we will support it. The march was just a demonstration of what we felt as a group. And then there was an election for county council. And not all the council persons were up for re-election, but there were certain seats that were up. And if we could change those council persons, the new council would have the majority to pass the King holiday. And so we did something a little different. We voted in the Republican primary, and most of us, the large majority of us, were Democrats. And so Avery can tell it better than I can. She was a little girl at that time. We drove to Columbia 3 times in 1 week to get the voting list and to figure out who lived in the district where we wanted to change the council person. It was 10,500 of them. And we sat in my bedroom one Saturday morning and addressed all of those 10,500 postcards and sent them a postcard saying, vote in the Republican primary, vote for this person because they have agreed to pass the King holiday if they're elected. And it worked. We call it the change.
I had some questions about that because I was sort of in and out. You were running the show, including.
I wasn't running it, but I was a part of it.
Yeah, you were running the show, including getting a gospel choir every week to serenade us and get us in the right mood to protest, which I thought was quintessential you. But why did you need to do the postcards? I think I know why, but I want you to explain why using the postcard. You had radio and TV, everybody was covering it. It was all over the news. We had boycotted during Mother's Day,
Yeah, I forgot about the boycott. We were driving to Spartanburg to eat because they had the King holiday and Greenville County didn't, and we weren't going to eat in Greenville County. It was fun. But we had a meeting at Reedy River Missionary Baptist Church, and Reverend Currington was still the pastor at that time, and he allowed us to meet. Reverend Jackson was there, and several of the ministers and people, including Miss Gibson and others who wanted the King holiday. And we talked about this strategy we call the crossover. And Reverend Jackson said, well, who's in favor of it? And he took a vote. I think that's the first time I ever saw Reverend Jackson take a vote on anything, but he took a vote and we all raised our hands. And then we said to each other while we were together that if this strategy is going to work, we can't broadcast it. We must target the people we want to go vote in the Republican primary. people we know who want the holiday. And so that's how that came about. That's why we didn't advertise it on TV. We didn't want to increase the voters against the holiday. We wanted to address the people who wanted the holiday to vote in the Republican primary so that their candidate would be someone who would vote for the holiday.
I bring it up because it's such a great story, and it would be a great television miniseries for Netflix too. But might be a dream big, right? But also because I think there's some lessons in that for today. I worked on some policy in Georgia just before I left to open up contracting in the Department of Transportation to more Black contractors and minority contractors. In order to get it done, we had to exploit a division within the Republican Party between the Tea Party folk who didn't want any new taxes and the governor who was tired of begging for highway money from the feds and wanted his own highway transportation budget from Georgia funding. And so he needed a tax increase. The Tea Party didn't want it. We went in between them and were able to get a policy authorizing a study and increasing the number of Black contractors. Our theme was create jobs where they need it the most, because you could take that tax credit money and use it to create jobs in neighborhoods and among construction people. And so now if we can figure out a way to divide them, we can conquer them. But together, you know, you got the old school Republicans who are upset. Can you imagine what the Bush family feels like?
Well, yeah, I heard a little bit about what the Bush family felt like.
But I'll take a Bush at this point.
Oh yeah, I'd gladly take a Bush at this point. I remember we were working on the Dukakis campaign and it became obvious that George Bush was going to win. George Bush the first was going to win. I remember looking at you and saying, Bush won't be so bad. We certainly wanted Dukakis.
But you know, look at that. You know, I'm not going to sing that, but he was a fighter pilot. Mm-hmm. They traveled the world. They knew about sports and other industries other than politics. They were sort of worldly. And the more knowledge you have, it's hard to be real crazy prejudiced if you are knowledgeable. Most of it comes out of ignorance. You know, those people in West Virginia, the senior citizens have the worst teeth, fewer natural teeth than any other people in the country.
That says a whole lot. It says to me they don't have.
How do you have time to be representing the coal industry and your people's teeth are rotting out of their mouth? And you're gonna lecture us about, he owns a coal consulting company.
And that's when you say he, you're talking about Senator Manchin, who's holding up the voting rights bill.
And we're almost out of time, so we need, but you know, this was fun. Thank you for allowing me to rant and rave.
Well, I want to rant a little bit more because I don't think that people understand. I was happy when the president, you know, got a little tough on people who will not vote for the voting rights bill. But it is unimaginable that Joe Manchin, the person who owns a coal consulting company, would oppose anything. It's a conflict of interest. He should be required to divest of that. But he's holding up the rest of the nation's right to vote. But he is in a terribly compromised position that I don't hear anybody on the news talking about, as if
and if you think about it, we talk about Donald Trump and his conflicts, his blatant conflicts, but they didn't just start. I mean, there is a theory that some conservatives want to be involved in government for the money-making opportunity.
And it's not far-fetched because some are doing it, like Joe Manchin.
And some doing it more and more. And once you allow that, you get used to it, then you get more and more of it. If you tolerate it, you get more and more of it.
And Jan, I wanted to ask you, we got a couple of minutes. The news is made somewhat of a big deal about protesters while President Biden and Vice President Harris were in Atlanta last week. Did you see any protesters? And if you did, what were they protesting for?
I saw protesters. I don't know if it's the same ones that are mentioned in that news article or not, because I haven't seen it. I joined them. I knew them. And they were not protesting the president. They were protesting the failure to adopt voting rights legislation, as they have been doing for weeks. Some of these kids driving overnight in vans, packed cars from Atlanta up to Washington to be part of the protest, where they witnessed some of us getting arrested,
Yeah, I
including
know you
Joy
and Dr.
Beatty,
Cole.
Dr.
You and Dr.
Cole,
Cole
Melanie
got arrested.
Campbell. And the point was to bring light to the issue. And ultimately, I do believe that we did bring light to the issue. We made it the #1 issue on the president's agenda. There's not a person who sees a newscast or reads a newspaper that doesn't know that voting rights is at stake. And so to that extent, it was a success. Now, there's more work to be done, and there always will be.
Well,
But I think they wanted, the media likes conflict. And so if you put out a press release saying we're protesting, now there were some groups who had tactical reasons for not wanting to be there. You named them before we went on the air.
Well, I learned all these names from you: Fair Fight Action, New Georgia Project, Black Voters Fund, Galileo. I learned that word from you. Asian American Advocacy Fund, Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta, and the former president of the Georgia NAACP, Reverend James Woodall. I learned all those names from you because of your protesting over the years and your strategizing over the years.
But let me say this, they characterize themselves as Georgia organizations. But if I put in a basket the organizations who attended the president's event and those who did not, I would put the weight of the Georgia background with the ones who attended the NAACP. How do you get more Georgian than Andy Young? The brand new mayor of Atlanta was there. Keisha Lance Bottoms was there. I mean, it's kind of hard. The national president of the NAACP and his state president were both present. So there's a little bit of jockeying going on inside the House, but that's what makes the Democratic Party democratic. There's room for everybody. There's going to be factions, which just it takes everybody under one big tent. And that's, I think, what we're seeing. But ultimately, what they agree on and what the story should have been is that all of these groups are united in the need for increased protection for voters and voting rights. I'm actually concerned about voters because this chatter that is persistent in the intelligence community about violence from the military and from other institutions suggests to me that we may not have seen the end of violent confrontation.
Well, we want to talk a little bit more when we come back about the King holiday tomorrow. I have a little different take on it, and a lot of people do this time. You're listening to Sisters-in-Law on Rejoice 96.9, Greenville's inspiration station.